Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Breathitt Lecture. It's really great to see everyone here in the audience this evening. My name is Michelle Sizemore, and I am, the newish director of the Gaines Center for the Humanities. And though I've only been in this role for less than a year at this point, my relationship with Gaines began nearly 15 years ago. And the Breathitt Lecture was the first Gaines event that I ever attended. It was very memorable, and the Breathitt remains one of my personal favorites and that of the center's too, because it is a distinction reserved for exceptional undergraduate research in the humanities. The Breathitt Lecture was established in honor of Edward T. Breathitt, an eminent Kentuckian, governor from 1963 to 1967, and a UK alum, who had an exceptional passion for higher education and the humanities. We're excited that his daughter, Linda Breathitt, is here in the audience with us this evening, and we're so honored that she could attend. This lectureship is awarded to an undergraduate whose qualities of mind and spirit have been expressed eloquently on one or more of the basic concerns of the humanities: form, value, and memory. And I should say that all of the applications this year were meritorious, but we could choose only one, and I am thrilled to introduce this year's Breathitt lecturer. Lucas Carlos de Lima is a senior in the College of Design with a major in architecture and a certificate in historic preservation, who will graduate this May. Lucas is a Gaines Fellow, and I have to say that this is a big week for him in Gaines alone. On Monday morning, he successfully defended his Gaines thesis. Yep. The thesis was on Pichu, a distinct and marginalized form of public expression native to Brazil's urban landscapes. It's a tagging style characterized by cryptic black letter and angular and violent typography. Very interesting. And just yesterday, he closed a magnificent exhibit that he co-organized with Gaines Fellows called People in Place, which featured creative work from his thesis. Other achievements at the University of Kentucky include academic excellence scholarships, research competition, first place awards, induction into the Tau Sigma Delta Honor Society in Architecture and Allied Arts, selection as an international ambassador, and more. Much more. Lucas is from rural Brazil, and this background has fostered an acute interest in housing equality, spatial conscience, and the intersection between social issues and the built environment. Lucas's talk was chosen from a university-wide pool, so all UK students are invited to apply for the Breathitt. He will be presenting on the utopian design principles of two early 20th century European artists, painter and designer Wenzel Hablik, and architect and designer Pierre Chareau. And now, Lucas Carlos de Lima.
Okay, there's a lot of interested faces in the audience. I want to say thank you for you being here and for you being interested in my talk. I want to also say a few thank yous. Again, thank you for the Gaines Center for all the amazing support that you have given me for the past 2 years, and support which without I would not be here today. And I also want to extend a thank you to Hannah DeWurst, my mentor, who has worked with me for a few years now and who is my mentor for this research project here. The original topic for this lecture was originated as a case study on material and light. And my goal today is to analyze the ideals of two artists as examples of a larger architectural desire to design spaces that elevate the human condition. So as I said, we're going to be looking at two distinct designers, the first one being Wenzel Hablik on the right, and then Pierre Chareau on the left, and then Pierre Chareau on the right. Hablik created elaborate interiors for both public spaces and private homes, emphasizing color, form, and functionality. His designs included everything from furniture to wallpaper, often featuring strict geometric patterns that echoed his crystalline interest. For Heblich, art and architecture sought to elevate everyday life through beauty and innovation. Charot was a renowned French architect and designer known for his innovative work in the early 20th century. His most famous creation is the Glass House, which was completed in 1932 in Paris, and it is widely regarded as his masterpiece and one of the most influential works of modern architecture. Charot was mindful of the wider implications of design and architecture and disliked mass production and materialism. He wanted to free man as much as possible from his subjection to materialism and obsolete conventions. As I said before, the topic for this lecture was born out of a larger study on light, color, and material. And the architects here used some of the design principles because utopian architecture envisions societies through design, where light, material, and color are pivotal in shaping experiences, emotions, and functionality. These elements collectively create environments that can reflect the harmony, innovation, and human well-being. The artists that I'm going to be exploring today use light, dynamism, material innovation, and chromatic symbolism as utopian architecture transcends mere aesthetics to propose spaces that inspire, comfort, and reimagine societal ideals. So, as I'm saying, today in my lecture, we're going to be looking at architecture in times of social unrest. And so, what are some of the conditions that these designers are working, are responding to? So, both of these artists worked in the early 20th century. So, they worked in the interwar period in Europe between 1918 and 1939, which was, of course, marked by profound societal chaos stemming from the aftermath of World War I and the Great Depression. The Treaty of Versailles left Germany economically crippled and politically humiliated, fueling resentment and hyperinflation that further destabilized the Weimar Republic. The economic collapse of 1929 further deepened the unemployment and poverty situation, while political extremism surged as people turned to authoritarian leaders like Mussolini in Italy and Hitler in Germany for stability. Meanwhile, disillusionment with traditional values and nationalism gave rise to both pacifist movement and radical idealism, such as communism and fascism, contributing to a much more fragmented and volatile European society. Here we see that art has the ability to transport the viewer, and in this case, to a future better than the present. Between World War I and II, and amidst the Spanish flu, artists sought a future where art and architecture could intervene in people's lives and lift them into paradise. Here, there's also, there might not be a common thread at first between these two artists, but a common line that I want to trace is that both of these artists believe in art as an elevation of human experience, and I wanted to bring this, and both of these artists were influenced by the philosopher Schopenhauer. And here we see his concept of the will, which was developed during the early 19th century and is also marked by a profound social, intellectual, and political transformation. For Schopenhauer, he said that a blind, irrational force driving all existence is what the will is. So it is the underlying, undifferentiated essence of reality, which is blind, purposeless, and beyond human comprehension. Both of the artists and designers that we're going to be seeing here today sought art as a way to improve human society, and here we can see that that is one of the ways Schopenhauer proposed to mitigate the suffering of the will. To jump into the first case study, we're going to be looking at Wenzel Heblich, which was born in 1881 in the Czech Republic, and he mainly contributed to the Expressionist and Art Nouveau movements. He worked in Germany and died on March 23, 1934. When he was 6, Heblich stared deep into a crystal that he had found in his hometown. He said that inside those crystals he saw magical castles and mountains. He said that those magical castles and mountains would haunt his artwork, architecture, and design for the rest of his life. In those natural crystalline forms, he said he saw the power of creative forces. When he was 25, Wenzel made a solo ascent of Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in the Alps. And while he was ascending through the crowds towards this glittering peak, um, this was an experience that shaped his 1909 collection, Creative Forces, which is a folio of 20 etchings detailing crystalline structures perched into the snowy heights of the Alps. And here I wanted to show you, just point out Heblick's attention to geometry and scale within his work, as well as in this image here, his attention to the use of line and geometry to denote space. Heblick's first paintings were made in Prague and were influenced by seeing Edward Munch's art and reading the works of German philosophers Arthur Schopenhauer and Friedrich Nietzsche, whose ideas challenged the comfortable assumptions of religion, morality, and science. In 1919, Heblick joined the Crystal Chain, which was initiated by Bruno Taut. It was a secret chain letter written amongst architects between November 1919 and December 1920, which formed the basis of Expressionist architecture in Germany. The Crystal Chain exchanged annotated drawings on imaginary utopian architecture. He says the whole group agreed that art has the ability to transport the viewers and and the group desired a future where art and architecture could intervene in people's lives and lift them into paradise. Heblick envisioned his architectural structures resembling prismatic crystals, which were not only just aesthetic, but symbolized a harmonious relationship between nature and technology. This vision was part of a broader exploration of how architecture could embody the aspirations of a normal industrial age while promoting societal well-being. His design included fantastical structures that blended organic forms with geometric precision. Light and transparency can be seen in Heblick's architectural visions, which often feature large and prismatic glass structures. And here I just wanted to point you guys as well, this colossal scale of his work. As you can see in the call out over there, the human figures give the sense of scale to this painting. These designs for him represented a synthesis of art and architecture that sought to elevate everyday life through beauty and innovation. As he progressed through his career, Heblick began to incorporate more geometric and abstract elements into his work, particularly after being influenced by Italian futurism during World War I. This shift is evident in pieces like Self-Supporting Dome with 5 mountain peaks as a base from 1924, where he moved away from smooth natural forms to embrace hard rectilinear lines. I wanted to read this quote from him. He says, "Your ideas should be irresponsibly free as a bird." He says, "Let us create a fresh atmosphere, a pure aura of spirit, wit, and joy." He says, "Many an idea comes to life through another spirit and matures into fact. Come, enjoy the struggle against all things negative and corrupting. Join the struggle, preach, rejoice, and blow the trumpet. Speak in 100 persuasive tongues. Sacred duties await you. Speak out, we should be teaching people how to be happy, man and woman, girl and child. Speak out and delight in existence, in the universe, in being and in perishing. We should be expunging the thought of war from the hearts of all humankind." Heblick's words and art are inseparable. Both are manifestos for radical optimism. In an era of chaos, he insisted that artists must speak out to re-enchant the world, transforming trauma into transcendental possibility. His legacy lies in this defiant joy, a reminder that imagination is not escapism, but a catalyst for rebirth. Heblick's aimed to counteract the era's pessimism. The quote's jubilant tone and delight in existence, and call to struggle against all things negative. This excerpt reflects his belief that art could heal collective trauma and inspire hope. Heblick created elaborate interiors for both public spaces and private homes, emphasizing color, form, and functionality. His designs included everything from furniture to wallpapers, often featuring strict geometric patterns that echoed his crystalline aesthetic. Over the next 10 years, he created textiles, furniture, jewelry, wallpaper, and combined these physical elements into refracted, colorful interior spaces, rooms that feel like living inside of the fragmented light of a crystal. Hablik designed entire rooms as cohesive artworks, from floor to ceiling, and embodying the concept of total work of art. By incorporating elements of his crystalline architecture concept in interior spaces, Hablik created environments that felt like living inside of a crystal. And this approach not only made his interiors visually striking, but also aligned with his ideals of creating spaces that could inspire and transform society. In 1923, Hablik's utopianism turned to decor. After creating modernistic designs for clients, he decided to redecorate his dining room. Working with an experienced local painter, Hablik covered the walls with a vivid pattern of 14 color bands, transitioning seamlessly from the ceiling and over the door and on the walls. He completed the room with matching textiles and furniture. True to his vision, this room evokes the light and feeling of the fragmented light of a crystal. One particular feature that I like to point in this picture here is the fireplace on the right. As you can see, the pattern or the composition of the room's features seem to denote or try to give the essence of a fire or warmth. As you can see, so since Hablik is creating this total work of art, he tries to make the room as cohesive as possible and bring out its features. This dining room composition was saved from the Nazi regime when Hablik decided to hide his designs behind a neutral wallpaper 1 year before he died in 1934. In 1923, the painting of the hall-like dining room became his masterpiece. The ceilings and wall were combined into a single painting surface, and crossing color bands ran through the entire dining room. Even the window frames and door leaf were painted to create the most coherent spatial image possible. A colorful composition of basic colors and secondary and tertiary colors derived from them formed a bold color palette. Several shades of pink to strong red, light green to dark green, and a light blue next to the most basic color, brown, orange, and gold and black, and a papyrus white background created this harmonious composition. In 1933, a year before he died, Hablik unintentionally saved his chromatic dining room from World War II by renovating it with neutral wallpaper. The walls were only rediscovered in 2013, surviving the Nazi regime in Germany. His work, and here in this picture is probably one of my favorite ones that I'm going to show today, is just a complete photography of the ceiling of his living room. And what I personally find really touching about this piece is that it shows the passage of time. You can see discoloration in the paint and cracks in the ceiling. And for me, this is just a way to illustrate that his work existed through time in spite of what was happening in the world. That is to say, his artistic expression outlasted the period of chaos and continues to give us a glimpse into his world and ideals. As we move towards the next part of this case study, we're going to be looking at Pierre Chareau, but most specifically at his building Maison de Verre, or the House of Glass, which was finished in 1932 in Paris. Chareau was a renowned French architect and designer known for his innovative work in the early 20th century. His most famous creation is the Maison de Verre, completed in 1932, which is widely regarded as his masterpiece and one of the most influential works of modern architecture. This groundbreaking project featured a facade made of translucent glass bricks and incorporated ingenious interior elements such as sliding soundproof doors, adjustable metal screens, and retractable staircases. The legendary glass house brought him worldwide fame. However, like many of his fellow artists, Chareau had to flee France when the Nazis occupied Paris and sought refuge in New York. Hardly getting by, with little income and almost no recognition, Pierre Chareau died in New York in 1950. Chareau says that a house is not a machine to live in. It is the shell of a man, his extension, his release, and his spiritual emanation. This is a direct response to the Le Corbusier quote that a house is a machine to live in. But Chareau's belief that architecture should transcend mere functionality and become an expression of human spirit is clearly illustrated in his quote. He believed in the creation of harmony between materials, lights, and volumes. His masterful creations were described by one of his contemporaries as being a mixture of charm and power, harmony and dissonance. He was mindful of the wider implications of design and architecture and disliked mass production and materialism. He wanted to free man as much as possible from his subjection to materialism and its obsolete conventions. And here in this image, since it's a panorama from one of the most predominant interior spaces of the Maison de Verre, I want to point to your attention to the material that is made, the material in which the floor is made, the glass blocks, and the use of steel in the structure of this building here. All of these elements are made apparent to, again, go with his ideals of the perfect harmony between materials, lights, and volumes. To really appreciate the glass house's essence, one must first understand the historical context. This house was built in the 1930s, which was a period marked by significant social challenges, but also significant artistic innovation. The modernist movement was sweeping across various disciplines, casting aside traditional constraints and offering a fresh perspective that emphasized function, simplicity, and a harmonious relationship between form and purpose. Charot embraced industrial materials, steel, glass, and concrete, and a modular construction reflecting his faith in innovation to solve societal problems. During the construction of Maison de Verre, the architects faced several challenges, the most prominent of them being the existing tenant at the site. So, as you can see, Maison de Verre was constructed within the structure of a hotel that was built in the 12th century. And the biggest challenge was to construct this two-story house in the space that was left by demolition, but without altering the third floor, which is where a tenant lived, and refused to sell or move out. Charot had to carefully dismantle the lower levels of the existing building while also supporting and preserving the upper floor. And this challenge required innovative construction techniques, and to adapt, the architects had to build the new steel and glass structure beneath the suspended upper level. The architect responded to this challenge by designing a pioneering steel and glass structure that offered both structural integrity and visual appeal. They were responsible for underpinning the second floor with a new metallic structure while demolishing the lower floors. And also I want to point out at this moment that while seeing steel here might be very commonplace for us as we are used to it, at the time this was something that was incredibly innovative to use steel in this way. Light and transparency. During the day, sunlight filters through the glass blocks, casting an ethereal glow across the house. And at night, the house becomes a luminous beacon, with light radiating from its glass facade. The transparency, while offering a sense of openness, also maintains a balance of privacy and intimacy, a clever interplay between the visible and the hidden, the public and the private. The house's exterior engages with its urban surroundings, while its interior maintains a peaceful sanctuary, fostering a unique connection between the house and its environment. Here, the interplay between the light and the glass structure makes the house a living, breathing entity. During the day, sunlight bathes the interiors, creating a kaleidoscope of shimmering reflections and refractions, and highlighting the rhythmic lines and geometric patterns of the industrial aesthetic. As darkness descends, the house transforms into a glowing lantern. The light within softens the rigid steel and glass facades, blurring the boundary between the private and the public realms. The elevation that gives the house its name are made largely of the glass bricks that were then associated with public lavatories and pavement lights. Laid in 4 brick wide panels, they established the 36-inch module that controls dimensions throughout the entire design. These blocks at the time may have had utilitarian connotations, but their use was supremely sophisticated, suggesting a delicate view that appears to hang in space, filtering the light and screening the private interior from the world. This delicate balance, Charot strikes on the facade here between utilitarian materials and exquisitely refined abstraction is in marked contrast with the main structure inside. The design elements and spatial organization within the House of Glass are key to understanding its essence. On the right here, you can see an isometric drawing of the main open space on the second floor, and here an exploded isometric drawing of the third floor, of the 3 floors. The architects adopted an open floor plan, which was not very common at the architecture of that era, and rooms are separated by mobile screens instead of solid walls, providing a very high degree of flexibility and adaptability to the house's configuration. Moreover, the pervasive use of glass creates this airy, spacious ambience, thus earning the house its moniker. Another challenge faced during the construction was the use of the creation of natural light and its distribution, as Sherrill had to devise innovative solutions to bring light into this building constructed on the foundations of this centuries-old hotel, where 1/3 of the space was originally deprived of natural light. And I also want to point here to the glass facade here on the right, and how it allowed lights to filter through all the floors of the structure. This notion of boundaries, transparency, and privacy is fundamental to Maison de Verre. While its glass facade allows for the observers a glimpse into the interior, its clever design features ensure the intimacy of the space is maintained. The use of translucent glass blocks, curtains, and mobile screens allows its occupants to regulate the level of privacy, creating a delicate equilibrium between transparency and seclusion. And here also, so just some more examples of these partitions, the diffusion of light through the glass blocks, and the furniture that was also designed by Sherrill for the house. To speak a little bit more about the furniture, Sherrill's goal was to just put the styles in a juxtaposition. The furniture tried to mix these industrial materials of the house with the more traditional style of home decoration, creating a unique aesthetic for the Maison de Verre. He tried to balance modernism and comfort. He had to strike a delicate balance between using modern materials and creating a livable space that wasn't as severe as other modernist houses from the 1920s. Here, just a bit more of that furniture in its context in the house, especially in relation to the filtering of light through the facade, as the use of glass blocks in Maison de Verre represents a bold departure from traditional building materials, embracing the modernist principle of honesty in materials and the adoption of industrial aesthetics in residential architecture. This innovative approach challenged architectural conventions of the time and sparked discussions on the use of industrial materials in living spaces. Beyond their aesthetic appeal, the glass blocks serve a practical purpose. They provide natural ventilation through a series of movable traps, as you see here on the left, while allowing for airflow while maintaining the visual integrity of the facade. This functional aspect aligns with the modernist belief that form should follow function, seamlessly integrating utility with visual appeal. And so to trace this very direct line between the two artists, I want you to talk about how they saw utopian ideas responding to the post-war impact. Both utopian and crystalline architectures emerged as a significant response to the societal calls in 20th century Europe, driven by some key factors. The geometric precision and clean lines embodied rationality and technological process. Structures used crystalline forms to evoke clarity and stability, contrasting with the disorder of war-torn societies. Utopian projects, often theoretical and aspirational, provided an idealistic vision of a better future. They served as psychological anchors, inspiring hope amid trauma. Crystalline aesthetics, particularly glass and transparency, symbolized openness, honesty, and enlightenment, a very deliberate shift from the opacity of authoritarian regimes and wartime secrecy. Utopian designs often prioritized egalitarianism, with communal spaces and equitable access to light and air. This addressed post-war demands for social equity, countering the deprivation of fueled political extremism. And to reiterate, Heblich created elaborate interiors for both public spaces and private homes, emphasizing color, form, and functionality. His designs included everything from furniture to wallpapers, often featuring strict geometric patterns that echoed his crystalline aesthetic. For Heblich, art and architecture sought to elevate everyday life through beauty and innovation. While Sherrill was a renowned French architect and designer known for his innovative work in the early 20th century. His most famous creation was the House of Glass, which is widely regarded as a masterpiece and a very influential work of modern architecture. Charot was mindful of the wider implications of design and architecture and wanted to free men from materialism. For him, um, uh, he wanted to free men as much as possible from his subjection to materialism and its obsolete conventions. However, the most powerful link between these two very polymath designers is the fact that their work existed through time in spite of what was happening in the world. Their artistic expression outlasted the period of chaos and continues to make us perceive art as a tool to dismantle the ideologies that fuel conflict, replacing them with universal empathy and shared creative purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. That was great. We have several minutes remaining for Q&A, so I'm going to pass around the mic for those who want to get us started. Yes.
Hi, Carlos. So what inspired you to specifically choose these two artists?
That is a very good question. At first, as I said, I was developing this research project as a larger study on material light and color for one of my individual research. And for me, the reason I chose this artist was just the real, for me, it was very interesting to see how their work wasn't necessarily tied visually to one another. They didn't necessarily share this cohesion, but they both were talking about, both of these artists were working in very torn Germany and France, or Europe, and both of these artists were seeing art and architecture as a way to truly bring out the good in society, the good things, and finding different ways of using art to change the world.
Josh, last year's Breathitt lecturer.
Thank you. Thank you for the great talk, Lucas. I really appreciated it. I was wondering if you had an example of maybe some architect that you like that's more contemporary, that's kind of carrying on these traditions that we see with the two artists you chose.
One artist that jumps to mind immediately, of course, I would like to give this greater thought in the future, but for now, I think the architect that jumps to mind is Tadao Ando, which is a Japanese architect. He uses light in many of his structures as a way to experience, to communicate this transcendental feeling. He has this work called The Church of Light, and it is quite beautiful. He just uses industrial materials just like Charot in a very delicate and precise way to create light conditions that are transcendental and magical and religious.
Thank you.
Bo.
Hello. So I had a quick question regarding what exactly you'll take from this research and how you'll carry it into the rest of your design career, because this is extremely fascinating. I think it pertains exactly to the climate we're in. Yeah, I just wanted to know how you'll be taking this research further, if you will.
That's a good question, because that's also something I was thinking about when I was putting this together. I believe there is a lot of architecture nowadays that is solely focused on how things look instead of how things work, or better off, the work that architecture does for people. That is something that I am very personally inclined to study, as we've seen, but I believe that for me, this relationship between the architect and society and whatever is happening globally at a level now is something that I am personally inclined to study as I move towards my career.
Mrs. Breathitt.
That was a wonderful talk. Thank you. is the glass house open to the public? And where can we see the art and architecture of your two subjects?
So unfortunately, the House of Glass is not open for public visitation. It is right now actually a doctor's office, and so in his house, and so it's not open for the public. And in fact, Hablik is not that well known as a designer or painter, and so it is even hard to find sources about it in the English language. But most of his work is still situated in the city where he lived in Germany, in his house, which was turned into a museum after his death.
It's gonna take me a while to get back there, but can you state your name when you get the mic? You've broken my streak. I don't know you yet, but I will. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Riker. You said that Hablik believed that art could heal collective trauma. Could you go a little bit more into that correlation and causation of art healing the world's collective trauma, please?
Few slides here, um, just to pull this image up because I really like it, and also because I believe in all of their work there was this idealistic vision of the future. In a way, it's not necessarily idealism or escapism. For in a sense, it's more of using art as a way to believe in a better future, I would say, both by inspiring creativity in Hablik's work or by being conscientious in the use of material and the effect of your architecture in the world, in the lives of people. I believe that those are the two main ways in which these designers saw art as a way to collectively improve society.
I have a question. Hello. I have a question that actually follows on this question. I was really struck by Hablik's manifesto for radical optimism, if I got that sort of right. And I was curious, based on what I know about your own creative work, whether there are any intersections between your creative pieces, how you think about your art and creation, and that manifesto of Hablik's.
Mm-hmm. I'm also going to go ahead and return to that quote and just put it up on the screen for everyone. Here, yeah. I believe that every single work of art is not necessarily political in a sense, and that political might not be the right word, but every single work of art has a purpose. And I believe that this manifesto is a call for using your work for expunging the thought of war from the hearts of all humankind. This is something that Hablik works towards and Cheryl works towards, and I'm not going to compare myself to both of them, but I'm also going to say that this is something I'm also interested in. And so I just see this type of work really bleeding into my future interests, my future interests in creative works.
Thanks. And would you mind stating your name?
Hey everyone, my name is Noel Aqua. Lucas, great talk. I have a question from someone coming from, I do computers, so this is totally new field to me. But one of the questions I had, like you mentioning how their work were affected by the social constraint during their time. But looking at modern structures, having a relatively more abundance of resource and knowledge we have right now, yeah, we have so many structures still, in my view, looking more minimalistic and boring. So what are current architecture trends you know of in modern days that push this idea of creativity and innovation?
Um, The example that immediately jumps to my mind is an architectural practice in a university in London. And within that university, they have a forensic architecture program, which is not necessarily surrounding, which not necessarily in the field of architecture is in the sense of creating buildings, but architecture in the sense of exploring social issues. That is to say, it is a group of architects and designers that work together to explore issues such as genocide or climate change or pretty much also social issues. There is, I feel like in recent years, a bigger push, or it is something that I'm also interested in right now, a bigger push of architecture as a field of research and as a way to understand human life and the humanities, rather than only what is the built environment and what we live in. Of course, those are very tied, but I feel like these are issues that are becoming more explored today in more abundant ways than just a structure or a building necessarily.
Do you have your hand up?
I'm really struck by these dueling instincts. The one in this quote, which is speak out, kind of make anyway, and be vocal with your imagination. And then the moment in time wherein he covered his work in order to preserve it. And that dueling instinct that many of us have in times such as these, where we are all vacillating between those two poles, when to be most outspoken and when to understand invisibility as a mode of survival. And I wonder what your studies of this project and also your larger studies about historic preservation have taught you or helped you to understand more fully about your own creative trajectory and how you grapple with those two very opposing but also intertwined and both necessary strategies for survival.
Well, I believe, well, the first thing I want to go about saying is that luckily, Havlik decided to cover his dining room in wallpaper, but today we don't know if that was a conscious decision or not. As we think about creative work and creative expression, there is this sense of, there are many ways we can look at this. When we look at Havlik's work, it could be that his work, he deemed that his work maybe was not worth it, other people were not worth of seeing his work or his creative expression, or that he didn't know what was going to happen and he just wanted to redo his dining room. There is all this sort of uncertainty towards that case, but I feel like that is something that bleeds into today. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the right way to go about our creative expression is, but as we see here, we should join the struggle against all things negative and corrupting, and no matter what we decide to do with our creative expression, it should be something that works for the better. And that is something that I want to do.
Would you just mind stating your name and position in the College of Design?
My name's Liz Swanson, and I'm the Associate Dean of Student Affairs in the College of Design.
Could you state your name?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Terry, and I really appreciated your presentation this evening. And if you could go back, indulge me, to go to the picture of the two city streetscapes that are destroyed. That one really kind of hit me in yeah, it's the two of it gets that one. That will do right there. Right, so you can see, listening to your presentation, I'm seeing the art and the architecture that was going on there. And I'm thinking that these are people who are trying to rebuild from a nation that was just utterly destroyed in all mentally, physically, emotionally, all of it, right? And so you can see that how an architect would want to go back and rebuild when you've got this physical devastation of houses completely falling apart. But now I'm wondering, when we're in a country that doesn't have this physical destruction, but we still have emotional and mental challenges for us every single solitary day, and maybe that's not true for everybody in this room, but they were responding to rebuilding something that had been destroyed, as opposed to people who just want to live a better life in a surrounding that's not been destroyed physically. And I would just like to know if you have any thoughts about whether their architecture was more about building something beautiful or taking care of their internal strife and the people who are around them. And I know that technically it would be both. Technically it would be, but I'm asking the question because what can we do here for some of us who are in strife or around the world? I mean, the world is in strife. If you just look at nothing else, the stock market and the global trade situation, right? And I'm not trying to be political. That's a fact. Everybody's talking about it, right? How can we make things beautiful for us when we're not looking at, a streetscape here in Lexington, Kentucky that looks like that one right there? Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you. It's I think what my first thought is when you asked that question is that they were indeed trying to rebuild, their houses, their hospitals, their services, and take care of each other. But instead of just being focused on how it looked, or even in this case, particularly necessarily how it worked, they were very, very interested in creating a new identity for themselves. So to break from the past architectural norms, so break away from traditional architecture such as the streets here, and move towards something new. And so as maybe we're thinking about today or what's happening, we might not necessarily be seeing destruction in this sense, but we 100% might be able to start thinking about which new identity we want to bring, what new things we want to do. Because in the end, the work of both Hablik and Charot, their work was about bringing new things and focusing on the good parts and trying to bring something new through optimism and rebuild through optimism. And so, I don't know, if we're looking at the situation today, same thing I would say, just remain hopeful and build new things that give us a better identity.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a Gaines alumni. Hey, Dan. I just wanted to respond a little bit to your question, sir, and then ask a question of you. I think one thing as we kind of I'm very comfortable being political, so bear with me, guys. But I think that one thing as we kind of enter into a resurgence of fascism that we are often encountering is a kind of a lack of imagination for how it creeps along. And I think that part of that is that most often we were taught that it cannot possibly happen here, right? It was so terrible that it couldn't possibly happen here, so we are less vigilant. And when we think about the way that architectural stories are reduced through time, it's quite easy to say, or to look at these images and say, oh, well, that doesn't happen here. But if we look at LA, or in the last 8 months, or we look at Appalachia for the last 2 years, we look at Frankfurt and Louisville today, what we see is something that's actually very similar to this, which is extraordinary destruction. And I think that as we kind of toggle with this issue of, is it our time to imagine? Is it our time to resist? Is it our time to rebuild? I think inhabiting optimism in the way that Hablik does is is our challenge. And it's quite precisely our challenge. I was shocked. I think you said he was born in 1881, so he was almost 40 years old when he said that. And I think it's easy also to think of optimism as a young person's kind of game. So I think my question for you is, I think many of us have kind of indicated a similar prompt, which is, how do we inhabit? How do we learn from this and toggle it into where we're living now? So my question for you is, as I also try to look at who are the architects to look at now, who are the artists, how are we kind of engaging them and identifying them? I'm personally historically curious how these people were received in their own time, in their own communities, and kind of what was the short and long-term life of those communities like? Sorry, that was a lot.
So you want to know about how they were received during their time? Havlik never got very famous or a lot of recognition through his work, and most of it remained contained within his city or his region in Germany. However, what is interesting is that Charot did become very famous for his work. However, he had to escape France and then move to the US, where he ended up perishing and, dying without any recognition. And so that is a morbid thing to say or a morbid thing to think. I know it might not be very hopeful, but as I said, their work is relevant enough that we are here today talking about it. And so maybe it is time for us to start rebuilding, maybe it is time for us to start looking for another identity, but the bottom line is whatever we do, it will be seen and it will last.
Hannah. Hi. I have a question for you, and maybe this is a little bit leading, but we're kind of moving toward the direct line between this presentation and contemporary issues. And a couple of questions have asked about contemporary architects that maybe deal with these issues, and also just kind of in relationship to Liz's question about invisibility versus outspokenness. And to me, there's a really direct line to your other body of research, your Gaines research in Brazil around a very specific form of graffiti. And so I wonder, because I think that's a contemporary architectural example of a form of resistance, and I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about it and draw that line for us, because I think it's super relevant to the conversation.
Yes, of course. Okay, so how can I make this concise? So, for background, I just completed my thesis on ampliação, which is a form of vandalism or urban communication, depending on who you ask. And I think there's, in Havlik's work, there's this, like this tone of defiance, of transgression, of saying, yeah, things kind of suck right now, but it's okay, and we can move on from here, and do we dare to be optimistic? And so, in a sense, I think a lot of what I'm interested about is people fighting to be seen. Here, might not be necessarily, for Havlik and Charot, a question so much about being seen, but having their work seen and having their work inspire people through transgression or through the defiance of being pessimistic. As I said in the beginning, I pulled that concept from Schopenhauer, and I think that was a very interesting concept for me to tie to this, because he says, blind, purposeless, and beyond human comprehension. Maybe there's people who are going to go against that, and Charot and Havlik both did, and maybe we will. Who knows?
Time for maybe one more question here. Maria.
First, thank you for your lecture. It was really good. So my question was about these themes of destruction and this house glass. Do you think that maybe the use of glass, that it's kind of thought in like the general public as such like a fragile material, was not only because of light, but because he was building out of the destroyed and so much destruction, and maybe there was like a double sense in the use of that material?
Okay, so this is actually very, very, very interesting to talk about because as I was talking about Charot and his ideals of modernism and honesty in the material and being conscious of what he's using, the economic impact of it, the social impact of what materials he's using, glass blocks were not a very elegant design choice at the time that Maison de Verre was built because at the time glass blocks were associated with public restrooms and traffic lights. Not very glamorous at all. And he still wanted to use glass, not necessarily to make a comment on the fragility of the material, but to repurpose something that was seen as not less worth because it was cheaper. And in fact, he just tried to reframe that view by using the glass blocks.
Thank you to Lucas and to the audience. Deeply thought-provoking, contemplative, and meaningful Q&A. Much appreciated. At this time, I would love to invite Mrs. Breathitt up to present Lucas with his award. And I am going to try to switch hands here. This is for you.
Nice.
Yes.
Lucas, on behalf of the Gaines Center for the Humanities and the Breathitt Lecture, I would love to present you with a symbol of springtime, a julep cup, and I hope that at some point you'll put a little bourbon and mint and have a good julep. Thank you very much.
It is also my honor and privilege to present you with the signature Gaines tartan scarf, which all senior fellows receive before graduation. It looks good on you. All right, so we have 1 minute remaining, and I'm going to make the best use of it. Part of my job is to promote the Gaines Center. So I wanted to let you know about 2 upcoming events before letting you go. So the Lafayette Seminar in Public Issues is next Thursday, April the 17th, starting at 1 p.m. In the downtown Public Library's Farish Theater. The seminar is called City Stories, the People Behind the Policies, and it will be moderated by Vice Mayor Dan Wu and feature 3 conversations between advocates and policymakers on some of the most pressing health issues in the city: segregation, accessibility, and homelessness. Okay. Also, One Day for UK is on the horizon. That will take place on April the 25th. And for those of you who don't know, it's the university's annual Giving Day. If you like our programs, please consider giving to Gaines. We rely on the generosity of donors just like you. No gift is too small. So more information about both of these events is available on our website. Thank you to Lucas, to Linda Breathitt, to Hannah DeWurst, Lucas's faculty mentor, Catherine Brereton and Chelsea Brislin for organizing, and finally to our wonderful, wonderful audience this evening. Thanks to everyone for coming out.